Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Captive Audience. Is Dawn Anderson tonight, operating solo. Leslie's not going to be with me this evening. Obviously, Sunny is, in spite of what you saw on the advertisement for this one, is not here with us either. I'm standing in for Kevin because Kevin had to do some travel at the last moment. So I'm the last guy standing, if you will, which means you get me solo. So welcome once again to Wonderful Wednesday and looking very much forward to this monologue, if you will. And I hope that you all will enjoy it. Please feel free to send me thoughts and notes on the chat line so that I know that you're out there and engaged. Otherwise, it feels really weird to be out here talking solo. So, having said that, you'll notice that I sent to you on the chat line a link to look at. And that's basically a Substack article that I recently published that's entitled The World Economic Forum, Russia, and the European Union. Now, before diving into that, let me just give you some more background associated with this monologue that I intend to give tonight. The first thing I want to suggest is we always want to be people who use evidence based reasoning. That means we don't resort to name calling. We don't resort to calling people misogynists or sexist or racist or any other terms that we see that are popularly used out there. We basically want to appeal to evidence based reasoning. So we're going to posit a theory, posit a thought, posit some ideas, and then based on your reasoning, you'll look at those thoughts that have been set forth and make a determination around, does that make sense? So you be the one that makes the call using your own mind, using evidence-based reasoning. So having said that, let me start with this first thought that I'll posit. And that is this. We are already in World War III. World War III has already begun. But World War III is an asymmetrical war, for the most part, not a kinetic war. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page around the meaning of those two terms, kinetic war is war where the bullets are flying. We know who the combatants are. So in World War I, we knew, for example, that it was the Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungary, and Germany and that was the Axis powers against the Allies, which were Great Britain, France, and Russia, if I recall correctly. And in World War II, we knew that it was Japan representing the Axis, Japan, Germany, and Italy. So Tojo, Mussolini, and Hitler versus Great Britain, France, and the United States and Russia. So that was what it was then. So in kinetic war, we know exactly who the combatants are. Asymmetrical war, by definition, is a war where the combatants are trying to hide who they are or who did what to who. If you can readily identify easily who the combatants are in asymmetrical war, then you don't have asymmetrical war. So that's one of the unique and slick things about asymmetrical war, which makes it actually a very dangerous war to be in. So we're in asymmetrical war, World War III right now. Hey, Lori, thank you so much for saying howdy. I appreciate that. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to synopsize some of the thoughts that come out of this article. So basically, what makes this asymmetrical war we're in right now such a unique period for us is this country, although asymmetrical wars go on all the time, rarely have we been in one that is so obvious and so, well, I shouldn't say obvious, but so frontal and so large. We have four major combatants right now, and I don't think a lot of people have taken the time. I've never seen anyone else out there articulate what I'm going to articulate to you in this condensed manner, but I think a lot of people are reaching the same conclusion. I'm not alone in this. So, four major combatants. The first one is the United States, and the United States representing the what you might call the last standing major Judeo-Christian country. That would be the first one. And we are, the United States, the world hegemon, the most powerful country on earth. And as a result, we're the target for the other three major combatants. The second major combatant would be, I'll call it the nation state that represents it is Islam, but there's obviously Hezbollah and there's other arms of it that seek world dominance, and they want to establish the world caliphate once again in the form of the old Ottoman Empire, which basically was the world's greatest power for somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 or 600 years. So it's only in the 1920s that the Ottoman Empire went away. Our generation does not feel that, or we're not aware of it because it's been gone for basically a century, but they're looking to reestablish that. So that's the second major power that seeks world hegemony, if you will, world caliphate. Third, we the Chinese Communist Party. This one's rather obvious. We see it in the news. It has a head of state, Xi Jinping. They made it very clear they're looking to establish the Middle Kingdom, as they call themselves, as the world's greatest power. So those are very obvious ones. The fourth one is the one that I think is the most dangerous, is the World Economic Forum, or the WEF. You might hear me refer to them as the Davos crowd because they meet in Davos, Switzerland. Um, they are very dangerous. And the reason they're so dangerous is because they're not the head of a nation state. They don't directly control an army, a military, a navy, any of those kinds of things. But indirectly, they have a tremendous amount of influence. Let me give you a sense for what that looks like. So they control all the major loudspeakers and all the major centers of power in the Western world. So think about the largest corporations in the world. They're controlled by people who inhabit this space. Um, think about the politicians that lead major countries in the world. So think about France, Germany, Great Britain, all headed by members who clearly are part of this whole Davos crowd. Think about Biden. That's pretty much what they represented. And their goal is to establish one world rule. So for them to establish one world rule, they have to take down the greatest power that exists right now, and that power would be the United States. And the same thing is true of those other major combatants. The Iranian crowd, the Chinese Communist Party, in order for them to achieve world hegemony, they first have to take down the most powerful country in the world first. Then after that's done, they can go after each other. So use your own logic and think this through and think to yourself, does it pass that old test I talk about all the time? Does that make sense? Don't just believe me. Run this through your own prism and think it through and see if it makes sense to you. Now, one of the key things that has to take place in an asymmetrical war for the combatant to win is you have to destroy the country that you're fighting against from within, because you can't defeat them head to head. Iran, the Hezbollah, uh, 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 Islam, Chinese Communist Party, or China, uh, or Davos, none of those has enough power to take down the military of the United States in a frontal combat. So that's not the way they're going to do it. The way they're going to do it is through asymmetrical war. And to give you a sense of what that looks like, never forget, these people are brilliant. They're not dumb. They're not stupid. People who call them stupid really don't get it. Now, your blue-haired Aunt Jane, who's running around with a mask on at the beach all by herself, screaming in your face and calling you all kinds of names, yeah, she's a dummy. But she's just the action wing of the brilliant people. She's the puppet at the end of the string. The people controlling her, they are brilliant. And their objective is to destroy the United States from within and any other Western country from within so that they can take it over. So what is the evidence for this? Think about illegal immigration, mass illegal immigration. Think about things like cashless bail, for example, taking the police out of major cities. No one would do that who's got any brains at all thinking that that would work. It's very obvious that if you take the police from a city that has a high crime rate, that crime's going to go up. So I don't think these people are dumb. I just don't believe it. I think they're brilliant. I think their objective is to cause crime to grow up. They go up. They want that to happen. It's strategic. And until more conservative people like us realize that that's the world that we're in, we're not going to get out of it. We got to realize that this is no longer about two parties with the same objective to make the country a better place, but with two different routes about going about that happening. That might have been true in the JFK days. That might have been true in the Clinton days, but that ain't true anymore. And this is very obvious. You just look at what's happening, around you. So you go back to the revolutions that have happened in the past. So how did the Russian Revolution happen? Well, Russian Revolution with Vladimir Lenin, who eventually morphed into Joseph Stalin, the only reason that they were able to take over Russia, take down that Tsar Nicholas at the time, was they had a massive war, massive economic displacement, economic deterioration, economic destruction. The country was flat on its back. And once the country was flat on its back, the people basically clamor for anybody to take over and fix things. And that's how they wound up with and they had a civil war on top of that. Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks went to war right after that. It was a horrendous set of circumstances, starvation. That's what literally led to the opening for the communists in the form of Lenin and Stalin to step in and fill that void. That's how that happens. You go to the French Revolution, they're pretty much the same exact circumstances. France had been warring against Great Britain, put itself in massive debt, which is exactly what the Russians did before. Tell me this doesn't sound familiar. and got to the point where it was about France that they couldn't pay the debt anymore. King Louis ended up losing his head for this very reason. In steps Georges Danton, Robespierre, uh, 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 Monsieur Guillotine, and the guillotines got busy. French Revolution happened because somebody was stepping into power and fill that void. That's how you wound up with the French Revolution. You look at the Chinese Communist Party. How did they come to power? They came to power because of the disastrous impact of World War II. Again, a country flat on its back, desperate for pretty much anyone to fix this problem, people starving to death. In steps Chairman Mao, and the rest is history. So these people are brilliant. They're looking to recreate those same circumstances in Western countries so they can step into the void, fill it, and move us towards their version of what one world rule might look like. So that is what we're up against. The evidence for this, and one of the biggest evidences for this, is you look at what's happening with the crime and you look at what's happening with illegal immigration. There is no place on the planet where having wide open immigration has been has had a successful end. And yet these people are trying to do this in spite of the fact that the general populations are 100% against it. So if you're following any of the international news, you'll notice, particularly in Germany, particularly in France, particularly in Great Britain, they are being literally gutted from within. If you look at London, the most common name for a newborn baby in London now is Mohammed. You look at like France, there's parts of Paris where you dare not walk through the streets because they actively enforce Sharia law, and the French have pretty much rolled over and given up on it. And the citizens in these countries are basically protesting in the streets, but their leadership won't stop the illegal immigration. So it's not that the general citizenry has woken up to this, but their leadership is refusing to step in and stop it, and it's obviously gutting the country from within. And that was the place we were headed prior to this last election, because we had a basically, I don't want to say that Biden was a player in Davos, because I think Biden, I'm not even sure if he was a sentient creature his last couple of years in office, but whoever was controlling him definitely had the label of Davos all around them. And the objective was to take down the United States. And they were well on the path to doing it. $30 trillion in debt. Are you kidding me? They're lying in our face about inflation. You can all feel it. You go to the store, you know there's inflation, and on the news, they're telling you all day long that inflation is not a problem. They're telling us the border's unfixable. Nothing can be done to stop the illegal immigration. One of the ways that you know that they're lying is Trump wins, and within a couple of months, immigration stopped and down to zero. It's unbelievable. The deficit stops going up like immediately, so we know that's fixable. And this most recent one is the crime, which is a natural bleed in to what's happened in Washington, D.C. And then I'll circle back to Portland in just a moment. So Washington, D.C., the federalization of basically how Washington, D.C. is run has already been enacted. And crime has dropped just amazingly within just a couple of short weeks, which tells you that if Trump could fix it, they could fix it. The man is smart, but they're not any smarter than the people who run the city right now. He just wants to fix it, and they don't want to fix it. That's basically the reason. Nothing else makes sense. They want the crime because they need the chaos so they can help to create the country's collapse so that they can fill the void with their own leadership. That's the objective, and we just have to embrace that as a fact. We have a traitorous regime within our country running these sanctuary cities, which brings me to Portland. Let's see if I can't pull up a link to the latest goings on here locally, because it's quite fascinating. So the Bondi, the current attorney general, see if I can put this in here. Here's an article that you can look at about her looking to basically bring the heat to Portland. And what has the response been so far? Well, the governor, Tina Kotek of Oregon, has warned that the city's sanctuary policies could violate. They've been warned that they could violate federal immigration policy. But our governor is saying that she respectfully disagrees and she will follow sanctuary law despite threats. This is what she said to the Oregon Capitol Chronicle. Now, this is absolutely fascinating when you think about this. There is no way that we can have, remember, the United States is a constitutional republic. We are a federal system, which means that we have 50 states that basically are not report to is not the word I'm looking for, but their laws are secondary to or inferior to federal law. If states can basically do what they want to do, you no longer have states of a United States. What you have is uh, essentially a cessation from operation. You basically have states that are seceding from the Union. What is the very definition of the Union? But by, if it doesn't mean these 50 states agree to adhere to federal law as the superior law. If there's a dispute, federal law rules. But these states are refusing to do that. The very definition of sanctuary city means we're going to do what we want to do. This is precisely what happened in the Civil War. You had states that decided once Abraham Lincoln was elected, we want slavery. We don't care what the federal government says. If the federal government disagrees with us, we'll simply secede from the Union. And that's in effect what's happening without saying the word secession with these cities and with these states, which means that we can't just operate with no rule of law. You can't have a city here and a state there deciding they're going to do what they want to do. Imagine if you had like 4 kids in your house and one of your kids decided that I'm going to ignore you. I'm going to do these things and I'm going to do what I want, basically. What would happen with the other 3? Well, you know what would happen. Pretty soon, they'd all be seceding from the family unit, if you will, by doing whatever the heck they want to do. So you can't have that. Eventually, the federal government's going to have to step in and enforce the law, which is precisely what Abraham Lincoln had to do the last time the Democrats did this. Remember, this is not the first go round for the Democratic Party. They're simply doing what they did 160 years ago and looking to destroy the United States. That's what the Democratic Party's history is. That's precisely what they're doing right now. It's essentially these sanctuary cities are declaring war. It's almost as certain a declaration on war as it was when they fired on Fort Sumter some 160 years ago. They're firing on Fort Sumter once again in the form of sanctuary cities, and is leaving the president no choice but to go in and enforce the law. Now, what form that will look like and how that will happen, I don't know, but I can say that I think it's brilliant what they're rolling out in terms of going into Washington, D.C., where clearly the federal government has jurisdiction to do it, and basically federalizing the policing of that city so that the entire nation can see for themselves that this problem is 100% fixable. The only reason this problem hasn't been fixed is because the people who run these cities don't have the will to fix it, because they do not want to fix it. Now, that last part has not been spoken on the Republican side at all to the extent that I know of. I'm not quite sure why, but it's very obvious, I think, to anyone who's thinking that the objective is because they want to destroy these cities. They could care less about the safety of the citizens. It's 100% about destroying. It's not even so much about destroying Trump. They hate Trump. That's one thing. But the people who control this thing from the top, they could care less about Trump. Their whole objective is to destroy the United States by whatever means necessary. And this happens to be a great tool for doing it. So fascinating stuff. And I'm just seeing your comment here. What actions are impeachable in Oregon against our governor? Those are interesting questions, Lori and Pat. I appreciate your discussion on that. I know very little about those laws and about how you might do that. But I have to imagine that if they can be determined to be violating law at some point, maybe these are offenses for which they can be imprisoned for. We'll see. We're certainly going to find out, because I don't think this is going to be allowed to stand. Because here's the thing. The proof is in the pudding for the citizens of these cities that are being ruled by these crazy people. You take a look at, I'm going to see if I can't pull this latest, this article up here about the impact of what's happening to the people who live in these cities. It's not so much, it's not about your political party. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about what works. The basic and foundational principle of any government of any kind is its first objective is to take care of its citizens. The first rule or objective for domestic police force or for domestic law is to take care of the citizens. The primary objective for at the federal level is to defend us from foreign enemies. In the domestic level, they're clearly failing. So this article I just sent to you was basically about how Meals on Wheels in downtown Portland just had to close its office in downtown Portland. for safety reasons. You can't even have an office in downtown Portland. And I know about where that is. I don't know how many of you all are very familiar with Portland. I know Portland streets like the back of my hand. I grew up here. But this is up by Portland State University, the southern end of downtown. So if you're on Broadway and you go out the old theater district by the civic courthouse, right, another like mile up the street, it's beautiful, big trees, big leafy trees that cover the streets. It's absolutely gorgeous at that end of town. And that's where this is located. So we're not talking about this isn't a bad part of town or a rough part of town. What we're talking about, though, is a city that's completely abdicated law enforcement. And as a result, you can't even keep an office like Meals on Wheels in business. It's just appalling. These are the most basic things. It's not like these people are Meals on Wheels are holding a bunch of money, but you can't even go to the office without somebody with the fentanyl stoop standing in front of you, without some guy defecating in the middle of the street, without some people passed out on the side of the street, without worrying about somebody like stabbing you in the back in the broad daylight. It's absolutely horrendous. And that's what the leftist sanctuary cities are doing to all of us. I saw this other article, and I think this is very interesting. It's about Seattle, our sister city to the north, but this article also involves Portland as well. And the title of the article is Seattle and Portland see the largest tourism decline of any cities in the United States. Number 1 and 2 for tourism decline. And then when you read the article, you look at the rationale given, because it's the civic leaders that are interviewing for this, and I may have spoken to you all about this once before, they come up with every reason in the world except the most obvious reason. So maybe the reason is, in Seattle's case, because Trump's tariff war with Canada, Canadians don't want to travel and do tourism in the United States. That's one of the reasons they actually had the nerve to give. Well, okay, let's just give them the benefit of the doubt with that. But then why isn't that true for all the other cities that are the northern border with Canada? It's not necessarily true for Spokane. It's not true for Minneapolis. It's not true for any cities in North Dakota. It's not true for the cities in upstate New York. None of those are suffering this. In Wisconsin, right? It's specific to Seattle. Well, the businesses don't come back to downtown Seattle because they work from home. That's another one of the things like to throw out. And maybe that's responsible for a part of it, but not for the massive decline in tourism we see coming to these cities. The most obvious thing, and anybody you interviewed in the street will tell you this, and there's interviews, I think this article that speaks to this, is people don't want to go downtown Portland, downtown Seattle, because they're afraid to, because the crime is absolutely out of control. You come into these places at night, you going at your own risk, if you will. Buyer beware, caveat emptor. I mean, there's people sleeping on the streets. There's people with the fentanyl stoop. There's people staggering around, blown out of their mind, going to the bathroom in the streets. No police anywhere in sight. People fighting right in front of you. Needles all over the place. It's absolutely horrendous. They hear the reports. They know about the crime. My own son was downtown. I think it was like a year or two ago. And they walked out of a restaurant, and about 2 blocks down the street, a major fight broke out. People running down the streets, bashing out the windows of parked cars. Who wants to be around that stuff? You're actually spending time thinking for yourself, for the first time in your life, I'm actually afraid for my life. That never happened when I grew up in Portland. You could be out all hours of the night, and you never had that sort of thing happen. That's the insanity of what the radical left with their sanctuary cities have brought to places like Portland and Seattle. So if the Trump administration is able to demonstrate, and they are, a huge amount of success in terms of delivering safety to the residents of Washington, D.C., just your regular residents, people in the other parts of the country are going to say, I want a piece of that. I don't care what party delivers it to me. I want a piece of that peace. I want a piece of that harmony. I want a piece of being able to walk downtown at night. I want to be able to take my wife to the restaurant. I want her to be able to walk out to the curb and talk to the neighbor without worrying about getting accosted. Those are the things that every citizen wants to have. And here's the thing. The mass media won't speak to that. They won't market that. They won't talk to the people who live in the cities. They're completely spending all of their time with their anti-Trump agenda, rather focusing on what people actually want. But never fear, here's the good news. Those people who live in Washington, D.C., they have friends and relatives that live in Chicago, that live in Baltimore, that live in Minneapolis, that live in L.A., San Diego, Seattle, Portland. And those people talk to each other. And I guarantee you the conversation goes something like this. Hey, I love having those troops in my town. I love the fact that the place is safe. I love that I can go to my grocery store and I have to watch an army back their car literally through the window, rob the store, and then run and leave the store. The vast majority of the citizens don't want that. They would rather see federal troops in their town protecting them. So once they see what's happening in Washington, D.C., they're going to welcome that. And that's going to be as if we aren't already witnessing the beginning of the end of the radical left of the Democrat Party. That's going to be one more shovel full of dirt on their graves, and it couldn't happen fast enough. So I thought you'd all be interested in hearing that piece. Um, Voter fraud. I thought I'd speak on that for a moment. So came across an article on that. Trump's announced that he'll sign executive orders targeting mail-in ballots. And let's see if I can't pull that article for you as well, because this is really important. There are so many things working in our favor because we finally have an executive in the Republican Party who's willing to fight. And I think this is one of the things we've lacked for so long. We keep having these namby-pamby candidates we put forward, like John McCain. That was like the worst candidate ever. Appreciate his service to the country, but he was like a horrendous candidate. I don't think he ever engaged with Obama the entire time when he was running for election. Romney, we all know what a turncoat and traitor Romney is. Basically, a classic rhino Republican. We haven't had anyone really, Dole, same kind of a thing. We really haven't had a Republican bring the same level of energy to the attack that the Democrats have been bringing to us for the last 40 years. So it feels so great to have somebody who's finally willing to do that. And we have to attack them on every front. And him signing this executive order targeting mail-in ballots is absolutely huge. Because I'm thinking, even in states like Oregon and Washington, the mail-in ballot was the thing that pretty much turned these states into one-party states. If people had to go in and vote in person, my thinking is, I bet these states are actually slightly red. I really do. If you look at how close the governorship was in Washington state, there were a couple of races in a row in the early 2000s where the Democrats basically kept rerunning the polls. Kept rerunning the balloting counting until they won. And that's essentially how they did that. And this mail-in balloting is just a huge opportunity to cheat. If we can reverse that, we'll be going a long, long ways. On the same line, speaking of voter registration, this is another thing. So I'm bringing you positive news here today. This voter registration thing is really working out to be sensational for Republicans. The trends are absolutely sensational. And what I shouldn't say for Republicans, I should say for the country as a whole, because basically what's happening is people are looking at what the Democrat Party is selling, which is basically nothing, and they're not buying it. For the life of me, it absolutely amazes me that they continue to refuse to run or talk about issues that people really care about. They're not talking about crime. They're not talking about inflation. They're not talking about immigration. They're not talking about foreign wars. They are a little bit on that one, but they're not talking about anything else, and they're not presenting themselves as having a strategy that would do better at fixing those problems. All they talk about 24/7 is how much they hate Trump. And bad news for them, but hate doesn't sell. You got to sell a positive message around what you want to do that's going to be better than the other side. And they're simply not doing it. It's the fundamental, basic, foundational principle of selling anything. And one thing for sure, you don't call the person you're trying to sell an idiot. You don't call them a Nazi. And that's what they do all the time when they call Trump these names, because the majority of the population voted for him. It just blows my mind that these so-called smart people will continue to keep making that mistake. It's just unreal to watch it happen. But more on that voter registration thing I just sent you. So Shane Goldmacher. So this is an individual who's evaluated voter registration data in 30 states that report. And what they're showing is that in those 30 states, Democrats have lost 2.1 million voters between 20 to 24, and Republicans have gained 2.4 million voters in those same areas in that same time period. So what's that? That's a 4.5 million vote swing in just those 30 states. Now, if you were to factor in the data from those other 20 states, assuming they're having the same trends, you'd have to say to yourself, wow, that's a really wicked change in such a short period of time. And where they're mostly losing them is in male and in younger voters. Now, that younger vote is more important because obviously, as time progresses, they're going to get to be a larger and larger part of the population as the elderly among us shuffle off this mortal coil, if you will, right? So the trends are not good um, for the Democrat Party, but they are great for the country. They keep focusing on hate Trump and not focusing on issues, and that's just not going to be a winning deal for them. But then the reality is they can't focus on issues because they're on the wrong side of everything. They lied through their teeth to us about inflation. And remember the whole thing about what about the price of eggs or the price of milk? You never hear them mention any price of gas. Never mention any of that because they were wrong every time. Oh, tariffs are going to ruin the country. Stock market's blowing through the roof. No inflation. They can't win on that issue. Employment, great. Can't win on that issue. Crime, they dare not talk about crime. We see crime. Well, actually, and they're stupid enough to do so by putting up a fight with Trump over the crime and what's happening in Washington, D.C. and the federalization of that city. So on the wrong side of that issue. You talk about the socio-cultural stuff, they're on the wrong side of all of that. The vast majority of people don't want their kids chopped behind their back. They don't want their kids taught about different genders when they're not around to even speak to it. They don't want any of that stuff. But the Democrat Party continues to push the very thing the voters don't want. And as a result, they're in massive decline. It's almost like the debate that Trump had with Biden. I don't know that Trump so much beat Biden in the debate as Biden beat himself. Anybody could have beat Biden that night. A tree stump could have beat Biden that night. And that's pretty much what you have with the Democrat Party because of what they're selling. They're selling things nobody wants to buy. You only put so much lipstick on a pig before everybody knows that's a pig. It's still a pig. And that's what they continue to do. So it's a fascinating thing. I thought this other thing here, there was this article about paid protester reports. And this is something I was never even aware of. I should pull this up and let you have a gander at this as well. Paid protesters. And this was a Fox News headline. See if the article is there. I didn't even know such a thing existed. But basically, there are organizations, and to me, they ought to be ashamed of themselves, but they do exist. And basically, people can get money to go protest. And these organizations exist just to do that. It seems like the most unpatriotic thing ever to do, but what can you say? It's a free country. People do it. And basically, what they're saying in this article is that paid protester requests have spiked 400% since Trump's federal takeover of the DC police. So basically, what you're seeing, these aren't organic protests. These are people basically paid to protest. The regular citizen, from everything you see on the street, that you don't see on the street, and talking to people one-on-one, they love the fact that those troops are there, and they love the fact that their city is safer and cleaner once again. What can you say? Fascinating stuff. Then I thought there was a couple of last things I kind of close on because I think they're so interesting. What's this one? We're going to skip that one and on to health because I think this is absolutely fascinating. Let's see here. So Slate, let me pull this. Now, Slate, for those of you who don't know, is a hyper left-wing magazine. For that reason, I only read it on an empty stomach so I don't get sick. But in this case, I read it because it actually reported on something that you never thought you'd see in something in a magazine like Slate. So this is like one of the most hyper left-wing magazines out there. And basically the headline is entitled, "There's something very dark happening to millennials and Generation Z adults." And what they're referring to is that there are 700,000 plus missing young Americans who died in 2023. Essentially, I can't think of the formal term for this, but excess deaths, that's what it's called. So there are 700,000 people who are dead who shouldn't be dead based on statistical data. So what does that tell you? These are people between the age of 25 and 44, working age people who are not here anymore, who should have been here in the year 2023. So what changed to cause such a dramatic overnight thing? Well, there's only one thing that I can point to, and I'm sure you would think the same thing. Now, correlation isn't necessarily causation, as we say, but it's a damn good reason to go research further. And we all know it comes down to that vaccine. And that was the very age group that was coerced into taking the vaccine. You want to keep your job, you got to take the vaccine, right? And you want to get paid, you got to take the vaccine. You want to participate in sports, you got to take the vaccine. And as a result of that, we're now starting to see the impact of this. And my wife and I talked about this at the time. We said to each other, we looked at each other, we thought, 2-3 years down the road, we're going to see a huge spike in heart attacks. we're going to see a huge spike in cancer. We're going to see a huge spike in all of these diseases that the press will refuse to correlate back to the reason for it, which has to be the shot. Now, I would urge that that research be done. Having said that, though, anytime you start forcing people to do something against their will, number one. Number two, you take away the liability in the event that it doesn't work, so they can't even sue to get compensated if that product doesn't work. Something smells very fishy. Something smelly in Denmark, as the old saying goes, and that tells you something's not right. And now we're seeing the effect of that. Thank goodness for RFK, because eventually this stuff's going to come around. I saw someone, I didn't make up this term, but I think it's so appropriate. And he called it the most dangerous thing in the world that a citizen can be is being morbidly compliant. I love that. Don't be morbidly compliant. Question everything the government tries to tell you to do. And I don't care who's in office, by the way. We should always be that way. One of the founding principles, in fact, probably the most key belief system that the founders had, was a lack in trust of the government. That's why they designed it to be such a wonky system. That's why it has an upper chamber or lower chamber. That's why it has three separate division of powers, if you will: Supreme Court on the judicial, the executive housed in the presidency, legislative housed in the legislature. So in 50 different states with the same structure, to make it very difficult to implement something that would destroy the entire country. So maybe one state could go stupid, say for example, California, and we definitely see that. It can lose its mind, but the escape valve is 49 other states that look at that and say, hey, don't do what California did, number one. And number two, the citizens of California, if they can't change it, then they can simply move to one of the other 49 states, which is exactly what's happening. So you got to give it to the founders. Talk about brilliance, but it's not just brilliance. They looked at what, 2,000 or 3,000 years of human history in order to determine what would be the best system to minimize man's ability to destroy himself. And this is what they came up with. It ain't perfect because man ain't perfect. We're not going to see perfection in this lifetime, but it's the best system ever put in place for man to govern man. And this worked beautifully relative to the other systems. You notice I didn't say perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than number 2, 3, and 4. And that's what we have. And that's what the radical left is looking to destroy, so they could implement one world government because they're smarter than everybody else and they can do it better than everybody else. Just let us experts tell you what to do. And we can get you the same result that we got you with COVID. Oops, I slipped up. I said that. So never trust them. So there's my, here's one other thing. I just had to run you through these factoids before we close this thing out. So the result of the shots. Today, kids between the ages of, I think it was like 0 and 11, take somewhere in the neighborhood, 0 and 18, 62 to 99 different vaccines. I mean, that's like insane. In the 80s, it was like up to about 11 vaccines. No telling you what it was in the 60s when I was a kid. Not one of these vaccines are safety tested or pre-licensed. The Amish didn't take any vaccines, and there was not one recorded case of autism, for example. Not one. So what does that tell you? And when you look at autism, the rates for autism have gone absolutely through the roof. Before the hepatitis B vaccine, after that, there was a 1,135% increase in autism. It's like insane. It's like insane. Again, correlation and causation, not necessarily, but it sure is a damn good reason to investigate. And one of the things that the medical establishment screamed the loudest at was when people started making this case that maybe autism is caused by the vaccine. The rational scientific response to that would have been, thanks for bringing that up. We're going to study that and see if maybe there is a correlation. No, that wasn't the reaction. The reaction was, these people are crazy. They started calling them names. They tried to bury them. That should have told you right there. They know good and damn well there's a potential that there is a relationship. And if there is a relationship, it would destroy their profits that they're making from these vaccines. And so I think that's what we're learning from this. In the late 50s, I think it was, and I don't think it was Eisenhower who warned the nation about the military industrial complex. All we have to do is apply that and call it the medical industrial complex, because that's what we're being victimized by now. I'd also add the food industry that too, but then our rant would go much longer than the than the time that we have here so far. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for putting up with that dad rant, that solo monologue. I very much enjoy talking to you all the time. I hope you enjoy listening to this as much as I enjoyed giving it. And I'll be back tomorrow with my partner in crime, and with Leslie Schneider. And I look very much forward to talking to you all then. Thanks a lot. Have a great evening, and we'll see you then. Good night now.